There's an aircraft in the United States inventory that was not designed around a mission or a radar or an engine. It was designed around a gun. Everything else, the wings, the cockpit, the landing gear, the two engines bolted on the back, all of it exists to carry one weapon into position and keep it there. The airframe is the mount. The Air Force has tried to retire this aircraft in one form or another for the better part of 40 years, but every time, something has stopped them. This is the A-10 Thunderbolt II, but you probably know it as the Warthog. To understand why it exists, you have to understand what wasn't working. By the late 1960s, American air power was extraordinarily good at a particular kind of war. High, fast, and far away. Supersonic fighters, strategic bombers, aircraft built to intercept other aircraft, or to put a weapon on a fixed target hundreds of miles behind a line on a map. But none of that helped the man on the ground. Close air support is a different problem entirely. It means putting ordnance within a few hundred meters of your own infantry, often while they're being overrun, frequently in terrible weather, sometimes at night. It requires an aircraft that can find a target the size of a truck, identify whether the people standing next to it are friendly, and stay overhead long enough to matter. Fast jets were bad at all three. A supersonic fighter arrives, gets one look, and is 11 miles away before the pilot can even process what they saw. Loiter time was measured in minutes, and a jet moving that fast simply cannot see what's happening in a tree line. The aircraft that was good at it, the propeller-driven A-1 Sky Raider, was slow, aging, and being shot out of the sky. So, in 1966, the Air Force began a program for something that did not yet exist. A dedicated close air support aircraft. Not a fighter adapted to the job, something built for it from a blank sheet. The requirements read like a list of things that fast jets couldn't do. Long loiter, short, rough, unimproved runways, heavy ordnance load, and, the part that shaped everything, survivability against ground fire. Because an aircraft doing this job will be shot at every single time by the people who can see it. Fairchild Republic's prototype first flew in 1972, and it won the competition the following January. The gun is a GAU-8 Avenger, 7 barrels, 30mm. The gun itself is a little over 9 feet long, but the gun's only part of it. With the ammunition drum and the feed chutes that loop the spent cases back into it, the whole system runs about 20 feet, and loaded weighs about 4,029 pounds. It fires at a fixed rate of 3,900 rounds a minute, which sounds like a statistic until you realize what that means acoustically. The engineering consequences of carrying it are everywhere on the airframe. The gun is mounted slightly off-center, just to the left, so that the barrel actually firing at any given moment sits on the aircraft's exact center line, which also directs the recoil through the center of gravity. If the gun were centered, every burst would try to yaw the nose off of target. Here's what makes the A-10 unusual, and it's not just the gun. The design assumes it will be a hit. The pilot sits inside a titanium enclosure, weighing around 1,200 pounds and nearly an inch and a half thick in places, built to defeat armor-piercing rounds up to 23mm. Not deflect, defeat. The engines are mounted high and far apart, behind the wing, where the airframe itself shields them from ground fire, and where damage to one is less likely to take the other. Twin tails, widely spaced engines, and self-sealing foam-filled fuel tanks all follow the same rule. Damage to one side must not be fatal. Some of these airframes have come home missing an engine and much of a wing. Because of this, every one of these choices costs speed. The A-10 is slow, it isn't stealthy, and it will never intercept anything. Those weren't oversights though. They were the price, paid deliberately for an aircraft that comes back. The aircraft's reputation was made in 1991. Before Desert Storm, the A-10 was widely expected to be a liability. It was subsonic and conflict opening with stealth aircraft and cruise missiles, and the prevailing view was that anything slow and low over a modern battlefield would simply not come back. But that's not what happened. In 40 days, A-10s flew more than 8,000 combat sorties and were credited with destroying 987 tanks, 926 artillery pieces, and 1,355 other combat vehicles. They also shot down 2 helicopters and destroyed 10 fighters on the ground. They worked at night. They hunted Scud launchers in the western desert, and they took hits, lots of hits, and kept landing. In more than 8,000 sorties, only 5 A-10s were lost. The aircraft that had spent 2 decades being described as obsolete turned out to be extremely good as the war was actually asked to fight. What Desert Storm proved was narrower than the mythology suggests, and worth saying plainly. It didn't prove the A-10 could survive a pure air defense network. It proved that against a degraded opponent with air superiority already established, an aircraft designed to absorb damage and stay overhead does something no fast jet can replicate. That distinction is the whole argument about its future. But we'll come back to that. The second chapter came in Afghanistan and Iraq, where the enemy had no air force at all and the fight was infantry in contact, often in terrain where a weapon released from 20,000 feet was the wrong tool. This is precisely the environment the A-10 was drawn for, 30 years earlier against a completely different opponent. Which brings us to the strangest part of this aircraft's history. The Air Force has repeatedly tried to retire it. The attempts stretch back to the 1980s and recur through the 90s, 2000s, and most publicly into the last decade. The institutional argument's not unreasonable. The A-10 is a single-mission aircraft in an era of multi-role budgets. It's slow, and against a modern integrated air defense system, the kind most adversaries wield, a slow, non-stealthy aircraft at low altitude isn't survivable. Maintaining a flight dedicated to permissive environment close air support is expensive if the next war is not permissive. The counter-argument has usually come from outside the Air Force. Ground commanders, Army leadership, and pilots have all argued that no other airframe does this job as well. The loiter time, the accuracy, and the ability to get low and look cannot be replicated by an aircraft that has to stay fast and high to survive. For decades, that argument mostly won. Congress blocked outright retirement over and over, though not completely, and this year, the Air Force asked to retire all of them, the entire remaining fleet, in fiscal 2026. However, Congress said no in writing. The Defense Authorization Act contains a section titled, plainly, Prohibition on Retirement of A-10 Aircraft. In March, American aircraft went to war with Iran, and the A-10, the airplane the Air Force had spent the winter trying to retire, went with them. Warthogs flew armed patrol over the Strait of Hormuz, hunting Iranian fast attack boats with the gun and with rockets. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs put the number of vessels destroyed in the campaign at over 120. And on the 3rd of April, when an F-15E was shot down over Iran, 10 A-10s flew the mission to get the crew back, flying what is still called, after 60 years, the Sandy Roll. So, the aircraft has now survived roughly 40 years of institutional efforts to remove it. And the most recent reprieve was not won in a committee room. It was won in the Strait, doing the exact job it was designed for, weeks before the paperwork was due. Whatever replaces the A-10 will be faster, stealthier, and more capable in a war against a serious opponent. It won't be an airplane built around a gun, wrapped in a titanium tub with a set of cables so the pilot can fly it home when everything else is gone. That aircraft was a specific answer to a specific argument that the most important person in the battle is the one standing in it.